Well, so I guess in the previous video I suggested that Wizpig could be a sphinx because he fits certain criteria that in my head seem to make sense in a sphinx-like context. He seems to be a guardian figure, seems to be subtly connected to a riddle concerning time, and so forth. And so here I want to kind of, I guess, explore another possibility, which is that if Wizpig is the Sphinx, then it seems curious to me that the owner of this island should be Timber. It's Timber's island. And Timber is a tiger, which is a big cat, which is the animal most commonly associated to sphinxes, and kind of these sort of guardians between thresholds in this kind of a context. So I wonder if could Timber be read as also resonating with the image of the Sphinx, and what would that mean? I mean, to begin with, he is some sort of a guardian between worlds because he is the ticket that allows Diddy Kong to travel to Timber's island, right? He is the one who delivers the message, the cry for help, that allows Diddy Kong to enter, right? Otherwise, Diddy Kong would be stuck at home with his parents, and as the plot shows, Diddy Kong feels stifled there. You know, the plot describes him as being bored with all of with the lack of adventure since Timber's parents came and joined his parents, his symbolic parents again, because Donkey Kong isn't officially his father. But I think it's almost like necessary for him to not be officially his father in order for him to functionally work as a symbolic father. But that's just so a possibility that I think is happening. Anyway, so the thing would be that he is stifled in that situation. There is a desire to break free from the ways in which the superego seems to be limiting his freedom, I guess. And therefore a cry for help is felt. He hears a cry for help. So he is not in trouble. That is to say, he, as ego, doesn't feel the trouble to be his. He just feels a certain tedium. But I think this is interesting because I think that there is trouble. There is suffering, right? And it's almost as if his tedium, to me, just seems like a repressed state of that suffering. Like he isn't able to allow himself to really identify with this suffering. He isn't in the position to fully feel this suffering or something like that, because he represents the kind of the egoic shell that comfortably lives with the superego, right? This tedium he is feeling is like just the very first sentence in the plot. So it's just like a little message from the unconscious. It's something that is still pretty unconscious in his psyche. And again, I would argue that, or I would like to interpret this game as a description of Diddy Kong's psyche, because of his name being in the title of the game. So that whatever suffering is being felt here, the suffering caused by the superego, is not entirely his. It is social in some sense. It is shared in different ways amongst different people. And I think that is why it is important that Timber's Island is a place populated by a society of people his age, who I assume are symbolically meant to be children in some way, right? And I mean this because, well, they're both Timber and Diddy and the others. The plots revolve around parents and a certain like subjugation to parents. So I think they are meant to be seen as children, as well. As a little detail, the opening sequence to the game, in it we hear children laughing and the sound of the shore, of water kind of lapping the shore. So it's as if there is something here about children symbolically as representing the aspect of the psyche that is in subjugation to the superego, or something like that, or that is kind of learning to integrate the superegoic aspects or something. So yeah, something like that is happening, I think. And then so in Timber's Island, Diddy is not alone. At home, it seems as if he's alone. No other Kong family member is mentioned. He's alone with his suffering, surrounded by all these parents. It's not just his parents. There are other parents. See, so that there is immediately a kind of a switch going on. In his world, there is a society of parents. It's not just his parents, it's the Kongs and the Tigers. And I think maybe this is what sparks an awareness of the suffering, in that he's sort of realizing that there is a way in which he doesn't just feel bound to his parents, he feels bound to parents in general. Not parents of all kinds, that is to say, authority figures of all kinds. It's almost as if by multiplying the individual parent figure to more than one, by there being a society of authority figures, it's almost as if he is kind of entering into awareness of the shared characteristics of authority, of superegoic power, the archetype of authority, of higher authority. And maybe this makes him kind of feel how he is more trapped by this than he thinks. Basically, he is seeing the systemic character of the situation that he's in. And then in Timber's Island, there is one authority figure. Well, not really. Maybe Taj. Maybe there are several authority figures, but it's almost as if there is an attempt, at least, to condense authority figure into one totemic figure, Wizpig, right? One kind of symbol to tackle with, to wrestle with psychologically. And as a reaction to that unitary authoritarian figure, there is a multiplicity of children, that is to say, of I don't know, of egos or something, right? He finds himself surrounded by other people who are in his same situation, more or less, in different ways. So, yeah, I think that sort of social or kind of communal collaborative aspect of it is important. And so what is happening here is that he's hearing a message, right? He hears a slight faint whisper from the unconscious, and this whisper has passed through several stages in order to reach him. because he hears a message from Timber, but Timber has heard it from Pipsy, and Pipsy has heard it from Taj. So there is a big chain of messages down into the depths of the mountain, the depths of the unconscious, the center of the world, sort of thing. And of course, the quality of these messages is different. The message Diddy receives is just a cry for help regarding Wizpig's invasion. The message Pipsy hears is an offer of help from Taj. But again, I think that the theme of hearing a message and all of them having something to do with help in a situation of suffering, is what unites these messages in my mind. And so it's interesting because, again, it feels as if it seems significant to me, at least, that the characters who are closest to the center of this message are the characters that are most stereotypically portrayed in my mind, right? Pipsy as this sort of, girl who wears bow ties, as so many female characters in video games and cartoons and so forth tend to, right? There is this like just unified stereotypical portrayal of what it means to be a woman. Right? She rides a pink cart and so on. So there is this sort of like nexus of stereotype, and then there's sort of Taj, who is clearly sort of like a bundle of Western stereotyped images of Indianness or something. There is it's a mix of this sort of an exoticized vision of like an other from a Western perspective, kind of, and so at least something like that is going on, and it's funny that both characters are being they're being mystified in some way, right? Because Pipsy, it's almost as if there is the typical mystification of the feminine, that it's almost as if she is more in touch with the depths, with the genie, with the message of Taj. And then Taj himself, also as mystical other, is in touch with the mountain itself, right? He is the representative of the god of the island. So it's as if through these characters, Diddy learns of this discomfort that he is feeling from the superego. Now, this is it's pretty funny because, of course, the again, if we read the game as being all kind of a dreamlike symbolic structure that basically circles around Diddy's psyche, it would seem as if Diddy is protagonist and ego to the game, then both Pipsy's stereotyping and Taj's stereotyping belong to Diddy. They are sort of issues relating to Diddy's projection of these stereotypes, right? Again, if we read like Pipsy and Taj as dream characters in Diddy's dream, then they are the id-like kind of projections of Diddy. But see, how are they being used within Diddy's dream is pretty interesting, because Diddy, within the comfort of his sort of life in Donkey Kong Island. In fact, I think part of his frustration or his tedium has to do with this comfort, doesn't it? It's somehow described that way. He is happy that suffering has arrived because it means that he can go on an adventure. But the thing is that, again, if I'm arguing that Diddy's tedium is just again, like a dream censorship mechanism to actually obscure the suffering. It is so repressed, so unconscious, that it only peeks through as a slight tingle of tedium. And this tingle of tedium seems to suggest that he is not free, right? That he is bound by the superego. And the arrival of the tigers shows this. It shows in his mind that, oh, there is a multiplicity of parents. It's not just my parents, it's all parents. There is a sense, he abstracts from this multiplicity of parents an archetypal parenthood, an archetypal sense of authority looming over him. And it's an authority that prevents him from being who he wants to be and expressing himself in the way that he would like to be, right? And he thinks, oh, this is not the life that I should be living. I should be having adventures somewhere else. I should be, there's other things, there's other callings that I feel, right? So this is, I think, more or less in my interpretation, the intuition that he is having. So, of course, that is a perfect description for the kind of the effects of superegoic tension in everyone else, in all of the other characters. So Pipsy, for instance, one could argue that, of course, it's not that there is anything wrong with wearing a bow tie or driving a pink cart or anything like that. It's just that it's the sheer repetitiveness of these stereotyped images, which again are usually the dreams, the projections of people who are not women, right? In the case of Taj, right, it's the projections of people who are not Indian. The sheer repetitiveness of these stereotypes suggests that the stereotype itself is trying very hard to suggest, by its repetition, it's trying to suggest that it is eternal somehow, that it is universal, that this is the way that otherness should express itself from the point of view of Diddy, right? That that all women are this way, or all people from countries that are not mine are this way, and so on. So it feels as if what's happening here is that the intuitions that Diddy is having, this call of help that he is feeling within himself, the stifling of the superego, is the stifling that is molding these stereotyped video game characters into place in his dream. So I find it fascinating that it's I don't even know how to describe it, but I get this feeling that there is like a vortex from Diddy down into the repressed suffering. And this vortex goes from Diddy to Timber to Pipsy and to Taj. And it's as if the closer you get to this vortex, the further away from Diddy's egoic awareness you get. And therefore, the more other you become from the perspective of Diddy. And the more other you become, the more the superegoic tendency to domination, to universalization, becomes active. So the closer you get to this kernel of suffering that is other to the ego because the ego is suppressing it, the more stereotype the representations of that suffering are going to become from the perspective of the dreamer, of Diddy. So there is some weird way in which by following this trail, you get to this core of stereotype, and yet, or at the same time, gaining an awareness of this central kernel of suffering is what Diddy needs to do in order to understand the ways in which superego is limiting the freedom of people and therefore creating stereotype, right? By saying you can't act this way, you should act that way, right? Right? You should only drive pink cars and you should only wear these kinds of clothes. So that at the center of that suffering, that there is an awareness of the superegoic control that is creating the stereotypes that are revolving around that kernel of suffering. Something like that. And of course, it seems to be crucial and for Diddy to identify his connection to that superegoic power, while at the same time not becoming inflated by this archetype. So it's a delicate balance.